This video is brought to you by Mack Weldon, a men's essential brand that believes in smart design and premium fabrics. They have a simple mission: make all your basics better designed and easier to shop for. Now, if you're a Today I Found Out regularly, then you've heard me talk about Mack Weldon before. I wore their antimicrobial silver t-shirt for 8 days straight in the middle of summer. It's not summer anymore, so I've switched to their great jumpers, but it's warm in my office, so I don't exactly need to wear this right now. But it's great to have. And that microbial t-shirt that I wore, it didn't smell at all, but I just felt weird after 8 days, so I changed it. But that was just one of the many highlights. I pretty much wear their radius pants. These are trousers, as we in Britain might call them, in my office pretty much every day. I'm wearing them right now below this desk. I do wear trousers while I record these. And I've also got a hoodie that is my constant winter companion. Mack Weldon has sent me a bunch of stuff. There's this sweater, there's the trousers I just mentioned. They also do other stuff like this. This is a laptop case. Obviously fits my laptop pretty nicely. And also, I don't have it with me here, but it's like a cool box, but it's more like a cool bag. You throw some beers in there, you throw some ice blocks in there. It looks cool, and it's great for, having cool beers. They've also got a loyalty program called Weldon Blue, so once you've bought $200 worth of stuff, you'll get 20% off all further orders for the entire year. Plus, you get access to new stuff before anyone else. Plus, gifts thrown in. Look, I love their stuff. It's just better. You can get 20% off your first order. Just visit mackweldon.com/brainfood20 and use the promo code brainfood20, and let's get into the video. On a cold February morning in 1942, the residents of the Canadian city of Winnipeg, Manitoba, awoke to discover that their worst nightmare had come true. It began at 6:30 a.m. as air raid sirens wailed and streetlights blinked out as a blackout rolled across the city. Aircraft droned overhead, and the dull roar of exploding bombs could be heard in all directions. At 7 o'clock, these were joined by the distant sounds of artillery and machine gun fire as frantic radio broadcasts announced that city militias were in full retreat, pulling back to a 3-kilometer perimeter around City Hall. By 9:30, it was all over. The mayor, premier, and lieutenant governor surrendered and were led into captivity. Over the radio, Erich von Nuremberg was announced as the new regional governor of the province. Troops in coal scuttle helmets and jackboots marched down Portage Avenue. Enemy tanks stood guard at every street corner, and the white, red, and black swastika flag flew over the legislature and City Hall. Winnipeg was now firmly in the hands of the Nazis. Now, if you don't ever remember hearing about Canada being invaded by Nazi Germany, don't worry, this wasn't something covered while you were sleeping through history class. The dramatic events of February the 19th, 1942 were in fact part of an elaborate propaganda exercise meant to shake Manitobans out of their wartime complacency. In the memories of many residents, it would go down in infamy as If Day. 1941 had not been a good year for the Allies. In June, the Greek island of Crete fell to the Germans, while from April to November, General Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps besieged the British 8th Army in the Libyan port town of Tobruk. On June the 22nd, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, while on December the 7th, Imperial Japan attacked the American fleet at Pearl Harbor and began their sweeping invasion of Southeast Asia and islands of the Pacific. More than ever, the Allied war effort needed the full support of civilians back on the home front. In addition to serving in the military or working in factories producing war material, one way the average civilian could contribute to the cause was by purchasing war bonds, essentially a private loan made to the government, backed by the promise of a return on investment after the war. Yet despite the dire situation overseas, many Canadians, knowing they were unlikely to be attacked on their home soil, had become complacent and disconnected from the conflict. Consequently, the returns of earlier war bond drives had been relatively lackluster. So when the Second National Victory Loan Campaign was announced for February the 16th to March the 7th, 1942, a small group of citizens in the prairie city of Winnipeg hatched a dramatic plan to remind their fellow countrymen just what they were fighting for and what the price of defeat might be. If Day was the brainchild of Manitoba Victory Loan Committee members Henry E. Sellers, John Perrin, and George Waite. Waite, an actor, is thought to have first proposed the idea of reenacting a Nazi takeover of the city. Preparations for If Day were extensive and meticulous, involving over 3,500 troops from regular, reservist, and local militia units, as well as 40 members of the young men's section of the Board of Trade dressed in Nazi uniforms borrowed from Hollywood. George Waite himself played a Gestapo agent. Special editions of the Winnipeg Tribune newspaper, renamed Das Winnipeger Lugenblatt, were produced with articles in German, and false Reichsmark banknotes and decrees from Gauleiter Nuremberg were printed for distribution. On the evening of February the 18th, as light snow fell gently on the city, the players quietly took their positions around Winnipeg and waited for the signal to strike. That signal came the next morning. At 5:30 a.m., a taxi carrying a radio DJ to work was stopped by a squad of German soldiers. 15 minutes later, the radio station was in German hands and propaganda broadcasts began to fill the airwaves. At 6:30, aircraft painted to look like German bombers began to roar overhead while anti-aircraft batteries fired blanks at them, and on frozen rivers throughout the city, charges of dynamite and coal dust were set off to simulate exploding bombs. Meanwhile, tanks painted with iron crosses trundled up Portage Avenue to secure major road and rail junctions, while special editions of the Winnipeg Free Press carried breathless headlines like "Bombs ravage Winnipeg as airport fight rages. Casualties are high during terror raids." Over the next 3 hours, militia units beat a well-coordinated retreat back to the city centre until at 9:30 they finally surrendered. Major John Queen, Premier John Bracken, Lieutenant Governor Roland McWilliams, and all the city aldermen were arrested and transported to a makeshift internment camp established at Lower Fort Garry, a historic fur trading post 30 kilometers north of the city. Then began the Reign of Terror. In the wake of Erich von Nuremberg's announcement as Gauleiter of the province, German troops raided the Great West Life Insurance Building cafeteria for food, roughed up newspaper vendors, boarded up schools and synagogues, suspended school, and burned books, all old copies already stated for the incinerator, of course, in front of the Carnegie Library. Portage Avenue was renamed Adolf Hitler Strasse and Winnipeg Himmlerstadt. By evening, a printed leaflet was circulated decreeing, among other things, no civilians will be permitted on the streets between 9:40 p.m. and daybreak. Every householder must provide billeting for 5 soldiers. All organizations of a military, semi-military, or fraternal nature are hereby disbanded and banned. Girl Guide, Boy Scout, and similar youth organizations will remain in existence, but under direction of the Gauleiter and stormtroops. Each farmer must immediately report all stocks of grain and livestock, and no farm produce may be sold except through the office of the Commandant of Supplies in Winnipeg. All national emblems, excluding the swastika, must be immediately destroyed. The following offences will result in death without trial. 1. Attempting to organise resistance against the Army of Occupation. 2. Entering or leaving the province without permission. 3. Failure to report all goods possessed when ordered to do so. 4. Possession of firearms. The leaflet concluded with, "No one will act, speak, or think contrary to our decrees." At 5:30 that afternoon, the performances were finally brought to an end when 600 members of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union and cloak manufacturers marched down Portage selling victory bonds to bystanders. While If Day was intended to shock Manitobans out of their complacency, its organisers had wanted to avoid any incidents causing harm. Therefore, they took care to widely advertise the event well ahead of time. Even the special newspapers distributed during the exercise carried an above-banner disclaimer reading, "This did not take place, but it could happen here." But inevitably, many citizens did not get the memo, adding to the realism of the event. Among these was Alderman Colonel Dan McLean, who, upon seeing the men in Nazi uniforms storming into City Hall, fled and hid himself in an empty office. Despite these minor glitches, the impact of If Day was undeniable, with the Manitoba Victory Loan Committee selling over $3 million in war bonds on the first day alone. By the time the campaign ended on March the 7th, 1 in 3 Manitobans had purchased war bonds, and the province had raised over $65 million, exceeding its quota of $45 million by nearly 45%. It is estimated that by the end of the war, victory loan sales had helped to offset nearly $12 of the $22 billion in government wartime expenditures. But If Day's significance went far beyond its financial accomplishments. The event, broadcast in newsreels across the country, helped put Winnipeg on the map and inspire other cities to rally even more behind the war effort. The city of Vancouver would even borrow materials from Winnipeg to stage its own version of If Day, and several American cities contacted the organizing committee for advice on staging similar events. And on May the 8th, 1945, as Canadians across the country celebrated the end of the war in Europe, the citizens of Winnipeg were perhaps more acutely aware than anyone of all they stood to lose, had history gone just a little bit differently. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Also, please do support this show by supporting our fantastic sponsor, Mack Weldon, link below. And thank you for watching.